I want to ask you a question. How well do you know your family? Think about some of the things you know about your family, like their preferences, what they like, their personalities, and so on. This is very important. Sometimes when you think about it, you go about your day navigating various challenges, but have you ever stopped to consider how well you know your family? That's what we will look at for the next couple of weeks, answering the question of what it means to know your family and identifying the needs of our family members. Our focus will be on Matthew 25, verses 35 to 36. I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me into your home. I needed clothes, and you gave me something to wear. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. So what does it mean to know your family? If you consider that question, the first thing that usually comes to mind is their behavior, what they will do and what they won't do. Sounds simple, right? But the Bible takes that a step further. The scripture we read earlier narrows it down to meeting their needs. Now, you might be asking, what are the needs? We can easily identify them from scripture. The first category is physical needs, the need for food and the need for clothes. We want to look at those three specific needs from the category we see in this particular scripture. There are also psychological and social needs, and those are all outlined in Matthew 25. Let's take a closer look at the need for food and clothes. Can you at any time say, my child loves this, or my husband loves that, or my wife, or my brother loves this type of food as opposed to that? If you can answer that question, you have a basic understanding of what we're discussing. This means you know the needs, you can identify them, making it easier to feed your family. The same applies to preferences for clothes and similar items. Outside of those identified physical needs, we could also include the need for touch as a physical need. Although it is not mentioned there, we could also look at that as another need. In terms of psychological and social needs, we identify them from the scripture, the need for protection and security. This touches on the need for somewhere to live, being sheltered. We also identify the need for love and acceptance, being hospitable to each other within the family unit. 1 John 3 verse 16 going up to verse 18 says, we understand what love is when we realize that Christ gave his life for us. This means we must give our lives for other believers. So, from this reference, we see the principle of sacrificing for each other. This act of love in giving of self no matter what. There's also the need to be cared for when sick. In each family setting, this can be handled in different ways. For example, you might have a sick child. One parent might give the child a pill and send them off to school. Another parent might say, perhaps you should stay home. Each person responds differently within their own settings, but it is a need, and it must not be neglected regardless. The next need we want to look at is relationship and support. This is the need to provide counsel and encouragement. We need to encourage each other, and where needed, we provide guidance and support accordingly based on the circumstances that may present themselves. Now, here's another question. What would happen if these needs are not met? Consider the friction that can happen in a household when needs are neglected. The feelings of abandonment and being ignored are some of the things that can happen. Conflict can arise because your needs are not being met. Frustration can happen. It can breed anger and resentment. Sometimes even unforgiveness can result. Here's an example from the book of Genesis. There was an issue, family conflict between a husband and a wife, Jacob and Leah. When you look at how the relationship developed from the get-go, Leah was not the wife Jacob wanted. It was actually her sister Rachel. However, Leah as a wife had a need within the family. It was not a sexual need because her sexual needs were being met. She had plenty of children, but she had a longing for her husband. Something was missing from the relationship that she really wanted to experience. Something her sister was receiving from her husband. She even named her children after her desires. One of her child's name meant, now my husband would love me. If you think about it, they had everything. Why did she have the need? You can see the spiritual dynamic as well as the social and relational issues that were there because a competition started between herself and her sister. This is an unusual family setup, not common today, but we can learn from the principles of the situation when the needs are ignored. She was still a wife, Jacob's wife. She had children for him. She was taking care of the house. Everything seems to be going okay. Yet, this question persisted in her heart. She kept asking God, when will my husband love me? This was a common problem you can see in the book of Genesis, clear in that family dynamic where Leah desired her husband. She wanted a deeper relationship, to feel desired, chosen and loved. She wanted something more than him spending the night at her house and having a child 9 months later. Jacob neglecting his wife's need also affected Rachel. It was because of Jacob's decision that Rachel was barren. That was God's decision concerning that dynamic. I would want to believe it was a direct punishment towards Rachel, but Jacob's decision led to God making that decision. When you think about it, the need was there. She had that desire. So, these are some things that can happen when needs are not met. So here's something to think about. How well do you know your family? What are the needs of each of your family members? And what do you think would happen if those needs are not met? And that's our show. Thanks for listening. I release a new episode of this podcast every Tuesday wherever you listen to your podcast. If you find this information useful, please share this episode with a friend.